Hi, I'm Raquel, a truth seeker with a deep curiosity who lives to question overshared beliefs.
And I'm Christina, an interdisciplinary artist who believes in elevating undershared stories.
And we've saved you a seat at the Bombshell Brunches table.
Join us.
Today, we have the great fortune of recording from Vancouver, BC, also known as the unceded and unsurrendered territory of the Coast Salish peoples, including the Squamish, Stolo, and Tsleil-Waututh and Musqueam nations, whose presence here reaches back to time immemorial. We honor their long history of caring for the land that we currently work, play, and reside on, and aim to uphold and uplift their voice and values of our host nation. Just a quick note on why we do land acknowledgements. Land acknowledgements have been an Indigenous tradition dating back centuries as a way to show respect for the land we are on. And they also give us an opportunity to reflect on the impacts of colonialism, reminding us to be accountable to the Indigenous peoples and to thank those who still live on and care for the land. So, without further ado, I get to introduce you to Lauren Legere. Am I saying that right?
You are saying that right. Yeah.
Right. I meant to ask you that before. I was like, okay, well, you got to go for it. So just a quick intro. I met Lauren at the Bigger Ideas Conference, which is founded by F.A. Ferrucci, who is also a guest on the podcast. And I heard Lauren speak as part of a panel. Mm-hmm. I had asked a question within the panel, and we spoke about it afterwards. And I just thought you would be so perfect to bring on the show. The question was really surrounding the idea of creating a culture of wellness within companies. And Lauren is perfectly positioned to speak about this because you are a business owner.
I am.
You do have employees. You do need to turn profit and be successful, and you know, you need to pay your employees and treat them well, but at the same time you work to create a culture of wellness. You're a counselor, and I think you also work with other companies on trying to help them create cultures of wellness as well.
I do that. I think a huge part of like what drew me to that is my own personal experience, but working with companies to be able to bring wellness much closer to the forefront of how organizations are showing up for their people is so important. So yes.
Oh my gosh. Well, welcome to the podcast. I'm so excited we got you here.
I was so excited to be here.
I think you looked like a little shocked when I first asked you. I'm like, so will you be on my podcast? And you're like, I don't know. Is this like one of those podcasts that everyone says they're on to have a podcast? Like, what is it?
I'll be honest. I've been asked to do some weird podcasts and I've been like, well, okay, walk me through it. And then I'm like, I will absolutely not be participating in this. So when people ask me, I'm like, can you please tell me what this podcast actually is? Because I don't know that I don't want to be a part of that.
Yeah. So my voice is going to be out there somewhere, floating in the ether.
Yeah, exactly.
Podcasts are one of those really interesting things where everybody wants to do a podcast until you start doing the podcast and then you go one way or the other.
It's a lot of work.
It's a lot of work. Yeah. But, you know, thanks to Chris, we're here now in a nice beautiful visual and story hive.
Okay, so why don't you give us a little background on kind of your career trajectory? Because I know you didn't go straight into the wellness sphere.
Yeah.
So walk us through.
Yeah, so I don't have a traditional pathway, I would say, into the work that I am doing now. I started my master's back in the day, and I was very adamant that I was going to do counseling and I was going to be a psychologist and had all of these big grand plans. And unfortunately, my mom ended up getting really sick and I had to take a step back from school. And during that time, a really good friend of mine who was in the liquor industry had actually offered me a job and was like, you can kind of do whatever you need to do. You can travel, you can kind of do whatever it looks like and take care of your mom. And I was so grateful for it. And so I started doing that, which gave me a lot of flexibility. And I learned a lot around business. Because you kind of have your own territory and like you're responsible for sales targets and marketing and like all of these things, because it was a little bit of a smaller company to start with. And then like fast forward a few years, I got offered a position in Vancouver with a large luxury liquor company. And I was like, yeah, okay, I'll do that. So I started kind of like at the bottom as a merchandiser and worked my way up. And it was a really amazing experience. It was a great way to see Vancouver and so much of the city and like so much of the Lower Mainland, really. And yeah, it was such a great experience. And so I learned a lot around sales targets and profitability and return on investment. And we did a lot of like number crunching and development of people, which is something I'm really passionate about. I love humans most days, like everybody. But I think it's really important to kind of like to take the human qualities into account when we're talking about business. And so someone's having a bad day and maybe they're like really rude to you one day and you're like, you're having a bad day. So we're going to revisit this conversation maybe a little bit later. And so I did that for quite a long time. And I had a really great conversation one day with my mentor. And she said, Lauren, what are you doing? Like, this isn't your passion. You're good at it. I was good at it. She's like, but this isn't it. Like, you need to go back and finish your master's. You need to go back to school. Like, you're wasting your talents here and like you're not going to be happy 5 years from now. So you need to basically get your stuff together and like go back.
You can swear.
No, no, you can't.
Oh,
no, you cannot on story hiding. Just kidding.
Okay, well, that's good. I chose the right word.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I ended up working while I went to school. I finished my master's, went back, like reconnected with some of my faculty, and was very fortunate that they graciously were like happy to take me back. And so I worked and continued doing corporate sales full time while I did my master's, which is hard. I don't necessarily recommend it to people, but like, you know, this economy, sometimes people have to work while they're in school. And so that was kind of that. And then I started working at a clinic. I worked at a clinic.
Wow.
There's a pause there. That's if you're not watching this, if you're listening on Spotify, I feel like you really need to jump over to YouTube or to TELUS and watch that because there's a moment.
Choosing words wisely. But I was working somewhere and honestly, the culture was so terrible. There was a lot of bullying. There was a lot of judgment. And it's so wild. People have this perception that as counselors or helpers that they're these like amazing, generous humans. And the reality is like not always.
I used to say this about yoga because people were like, that must be the most zen. Because I used to work in yoga world. And they're like, oh, everyone must be so zen. I'm like, people come to yoga because they need yoga. They're not always zen. They need this.
Yeah, totally. That's so true though, right? Like, and that's true for every industry. I'll be very clear. I'm not just calling out like helpers and wellness generally. But I came home one day after an exceptionally bad interaction with a human who every single time I came to work, they were a superior and they would comment on me. Like they would comment on what I look like for the day or what I had on or if I had too much makeup on or not enough makeup on and my hair. And it was like, this has nothing to do with my skill sets. Like, and I showed up more or less kind of like what I'm wearing now.
Which is, by the way, on point. May I say.
And besides the point.
Yeah, it's true.
Yeah. And so I had this moment. I was talking to my I guess he was my fiance at the time. And I was just like, there is no way that I can actually do this for the rest of my life. I can't work in a place that it has nothing to do with my skill set. And I come home so drained. And my job is to show up for people and hold space and like support them in their own journeys. And I'm worried about what like shoes I have on. Like this is just getting to be insane.
Yeah.
And so I made the decision I was like, I joke often with humans that are close to me that I have the confidence of like a 40-year-old white guy.
I love that.
And
also, can I have that?
Yeah. And I say that because, you know, and we're going to get into some conversations around profitability and talking about corporate culture, but a huge piece of it is like I can show up and I know I'm good at my job. And I don't let people tell me that aren't part of the industry that I'm doing a bad job. Like, I think you have to filter the information that you get. And so I said, I can actually do this better than where I'm doing it. And when I first started hiring people, my actual job, and I have this still, it says, I don't care if you have blue hair, if you have piercings, if you have tattoos, there's going to be a person that wants to work with you because now you've just made yourself approachable. And I like, come as you are, people are going to find you and they're going to love you for it. And so I started Latitude Counselling.
And Latitude Wellness.
So wellness started in 2022.
Okay.
So the counseling side was started just by me. I started, the pandemic hit, we grew immensely. Like it was probably one of the craziest experiences that I've ever had in terms of exponential growth. When companies talk about exponential growth, they're looking at like numbers that aren't precedented, really. And so when Latitude Counselling started, within my first year, I had already hired 6 practitioners.
Wow.
Again, not heard of, right? And they were full. And we had to keep hiring. And so I had like a full admin team that was working remotely, and then all of my practitioners were working remotely. And so during that time, we like moved to Penticton. It was so lovely. I loved it. And then I had always had these dreams of growing into a wellness clinic. I think the mind and body are so intimately connected. And fun fact, most of your serotonin, which is like your happy hormone, is actually produced in your gut. 90% of your serotonin.
Interesting.
Wow.
So
gut health is like a whole thing.
It's a whole thing. Yes.
Wow.
And so I was like, I really want to do this wellness clinic. And I'm not sure if I want to do it by myself or like what that's actually going to look like. And as many miraculous things in the world happen, I was connected to my now business partner, Dr. Serena Apple. And she was working at a clinic, had very similar experiences. Not necessarily that she was taken advantage of, because I feel like that's my words, that's not hers. But she kind of got to a place where she's like, I'm building and for what? Like someone else, and I'm not appreciated and I'm not supported. And that's something that's really challenging. And so we ended up connecting and we were aligned on quite a lot. And we said, okay, let's do this thing. Let's actually start a clinic, like a wellness clinic. And so the wellness clinic is actually like acupuncture and cupping and chiropractics and naturopathic medicine and massage therapy and pelvic floor physio. It's all of these things. And the counseling side is technically still separate, but we operate under one house just to make things accessible, and then referrals, and then it also makes it integrated holistic care.
I think it also gives people a different outlook and a different perspective of how to come about taking care of their own wellness. When it goes under like a brand, I don't know, this is more Raquel's side than mine, but branding and having your company positioned in the way that it is, it allows me to feel as someone whose parents or people around me are more traditionally minded.
Yes.
Or, old world minded, I don't know how to say it, but like to be able to have an integrated health clinic that doesn't sound, as Raquel would say, woo-woo.
Or fluffy.
Extraneous. I think that's a really important note.
Yeah. People that know me well know that I am very science-based, fact-based. I don't love the fluffy stuff, and I've worked really hard to get better at that side of things because there are folks that really need it. But a huge portion, like when we're hiring people, like I ask, what are the ways that you practice? Where do you get this information? How do you research? How do you stay on top of things? And it's not a judgment if someone says like, they're not necessarily using empirically supported modalities. Maybe that works for them. But for me, I need to feel comfortable and confident that the humans that I employ or contract to work with humans in the community that trust us are going to get care that actually is going to make them feel better and be better, and not just use them as, guinea pigs of like, we don't know if this is actually going to work, but let's try it. So yeah, so now we operate as like Latitude Wellness and Counseling, as a way of being able to like wrap our whole selves around people.
Is that was that the background for Latitude? How did you choose that word?
Oh, I have, that's like a whole story, but I was really trying to figure out what is it that people experience in therapy. And for me, having had my own therapy over the years and really trying to figure out what is it that I gained from it. Obviously, there's a lot, so I'll preface it with that. But a huge piece of it is like the latitude to be able to speak and act and think differently necessarily than what people are telling you you can, right? Someone having the latitude to show up the way they need to or to speak in a certain way. And for me, that like really, really resonated. And so I landed on it and I workshopped it. I sent it to probably 5 of my closest friends. And this is for sure a conversation for another day, but every single one of them told me it was a terrible name. And every single one of them told me not to do this.
What?
Every one of them.
But then your 40-year-old white male came up
and was like, why did I ask you? And he was still going to do it.
Yeah, I was like, I don't agree with your life choices. I'm going to do what I think is best. Joking mostly, but like, I was like, okay, I shouldn't have asked. I like it. Yeah. I'm just going to go with it. And it resonates with people. So I'm very happy that I listened to my gut.
And going back to what you said earlier, my therapist says, you put your radar down. You put your dot on the radar, and then other people come to that, and not the other way around of like, are you my person? Are you my person? Are you my person? Like, you put your dot on the radar and let those people come to you. So people
gravitate to you.
Yeah.
When you show up authentically.
Yeah.
And 100%. So that was very much Latitude. I'm like,
I love it.
Yeah.
I love that.
Okay, I want to dig into profit versus wellness. And
yes,
before the cameras were rolling and before the mics started, we were kind of discussing how a lot of people balk at the idea of putting profit and wellness together in the same sentence, that this is often considered a dichotomy, like two complete separate ideas that shouldn't be able to work together. Can you just speak on that? You were mentioning a few statistics and you were mentioning kind of your ideas around that. So just elaborate for us.
Yeah. So corporations typically, and small business, I will say, like as a small business owner, finances can be tight, right? So you have to be strategic with what you're offering back to your teams. For the sake of the example, I'm going to use more of like a corporate enterprise because it allows, generally, like they have more benefits than maybe a small business does. And so what we actually see when we look at the statistics is that profitability increases exponentially when companies invest in wellness for their employees. And that stat is 4-to-1. So for every $1 a company spends on wellness for their teams, they get $4 back in profitability.
And that's in Canada.
That's Canada. That's a Canadian statistic. If we're looking at the whole picture, because obviously I don't want to glorify just that stat, it's the range truly, if we're looking at every industry across everything that's operating in Canada, it's like $1.75 to $4 in return. So you're almost doubling it, even on the low end, right? And companies, especially coming out of COVID, a huge piece of what we see is that people want different things than what they did pre-COVID. And if organizations aren't going to offer that for their well-being, you're going to see profitability decrease. Quiet quitting has been like a whole term, right?
Yeah.
That people are talking about now and experiencing. And a huge piece of that is coming from wellness, from burnout, and from feeling as though they aren't supported and their company doesn't care about them.
Yeah. My dad was an HR director for 30 years, and he said the most expensive thing is hiring again. It's so expensive. Retention it can be so costly when you lose. And he was in charge of 12 different regions across Asia. And he was just like relocating. You put all of this time and energy in, and a recruitment effort is a very, very costly exercise. So
I think even productivity is another huge piece, especially when we start looking at this quiet quitting culture, which is by no means new, but I think we saw like such a boom of it throughout COVID and after COVID even, where retention is big, but having people who are present but not actively working for the work with the clients, the company anymore, that is also really expensive. And it's a little insidious in the sense that it can be hidden a little bit more. You know, there's not like a hard number where you can look at and be like, oh, you know, unless you're tracking that. Some agencies have that, but where you can see like productivity is just diving across a corporation. And I think that kind of brings me to my next question about, I guess, the difference between creating a wellness culture and having wellness options, because I think sometimes companies maybe have booklets with great benefit packages.
Yes.
And sometimes it's not even the fault of the company. Like you mentioned small businesses. Sometimes you just have to run to keep the small business afloat, right?
Totally.
And that's difficult. That's a challenge. So how can a company, whether they're a large organization or a large enterprise versus, you know, a small company, how can they, I don't know, navigate creating a wellness culture so that people can actually utilize? Because Canadians tend to have pretty decent benefits. Like I'll say, if we look at our U.S. counterparts, you know, for us here, if you're working for a company full time, it would be odd if they didn't have a benefits package. Like I've not really ever seen that in my career. So for us, we're in a very fortunate position where that's, you know, pretty standard. But then how do we make sure people are actually creating a healthy culture where people can utilize those benefits?
Yeah, I think that's $1 million question for a lot of organizations. Really, when we're talking about how to implement a wellness culture, it's what is the company doing to make wellness accessible? Not just are we like using our EAP program, right, for employee assistance program? Is it that we're just giving folks a booklet as a reminder, right? For folks that aren't allowed to take a day off to go to a doctor's appointment or take time off to go to a doctor's appointment, right? Is that making wellness accessible? Not particularly. Is that now making someone feel like they're going to get in trouble or shamed because they're going to an appointment of whatever kind and they couldn't do it after work hours, right? And so this is a huge piece of where the hybrid option for organizations really comes in, because we want to look at how are we making it accessible. So organizations that are bringing in wellness practitioners, for example, and we've done this a few times with different companies, is, okay, we're going to hire your team for a day and we're going to set you up in different rooms, and our employees can use their benefits for a massage during work hours, for chiro during work hours, acupuncture, whatever it is. I know one of my girlfriends is the senior VP for a box company, and they actually have a physiotherapist on site.
Wow.
That works with them because their jobs are so laborious, right? So physical. And so they've really tried to figure out how can we make their wellness and functioning better, because they have figured out that it actually is profitable for them to have people like that on staff, right?
I think the key phrase that I just heard is they have figured out that it's profitable. And I think for any business, because the arts and entertainment industry is a totally different world.
Totally different.
But I think that is something that as solopreneurs, as creatorpreneurs, as entrepreneurs, we can start thinking about is, what do we need to motivate us? Like, what's the tipping point where we realize that actually this is profitable to do? And I also wanted to ask, on the flip side of that, how, as an employee or as someone who works for a small business, can one advocate or bring up this kind of conversation? Do you work with people individually to say, could you potentially approach your employer and ask for this?
I probably say that at least once a day to somebody, to be honest. I'm sure organizations are like, this damn Lauren, like, oh my gosh.
But what are some of the tools that you give people to take?
Yeah, so a lot of organizations offer some sort of check-in process, right? So you can maybe do like biannual. It's not as common these days to see like frequent check-ins, but we really encourage folks to have the conversation. Hey, I was wondering, what do you think of us bringing in therapist or a burnout specialist to actually talk about burnout with the team and give them tools. And so sometimes folks approach me about it and ask like, how can I have this conversation? And sometimes it's, okay, well, if you really want that benefit, how do you talk to your employer about it? Like, are they someone that receives it? And then we have a lot of conversations around nonviolent communication and being able to ask questions in a non-confrontational way and to see kind of what happens. In all honesty, I would say that there's probably about 20% that actually have change happen with that. That doesn't mean they're not advocating for it.
That's 1 in 5. That's better than 0 in 5.
But I think actually you're hitting on a point that I think is really interesting, and I did some research to get ready for this episode specifically. And when I was reading, and again, I think it was the Harvard Business Review, but don't quote me on that. I believe. This was a concept that they were actually talking about when they were talking about creating a culture that leads to profitability. They were saying it's really important to make everybody feel like they have a voice, and not just make them feel like it, to make sure that everybody has a voice. And there was actually key demographics that they outlined that are by far the most profitable to make sure that they have a voice and that they can champion things and make changes in companies. That included women, frontline workers, men who have hourly rates, which was kind of interesting, just thrown in there, and marginalized communities. There might have been one more that I'm missing, but those 4 were primary key people. Oh, there was one more, and it was long-term employees, so people who have been at the company for a very long time. It's these groups felt like they had a voice and they had impact. You had a much happier culture. So, going back to that piece of profitability and having those conversations, it's good business to give your people a voice as well. Yeah.
I think the challenge and the pushback I get when I have these conversations with industry leaders or managers or the organizations that I'm working with is, well, my employees don't actually want wellness. They want time off. They want this. I'm like, okay, well, a day off is wellness, right? If that means that person is going to go and spend it in nature, that's wellness. If that means that person is going to sleep because they are sleep deprived or they're a new parent or whatever it is, that's still wellness. And so it's looking at wellness in a broader sense than what we have determined wellness to be, right? Wellness isn't the absence of illness. It's like a much broader health forward picture. And so to your point, if we're asking people, what would you like? How would you like to use your wellness time? Right? That conversation is going to give you so much more insight into what your people actually want. Is it increase in benefits? Is it accessibility to a certain type of practitioner? Is it having lunch and learns brought in so that they're actually able to do things on their lunch hour? Is it that they want more time off or to be able to work remotely or have certain periods of time in the year where they can take a month and work in Costa Rica, for example? They're still working, they're still getting their stuff done, but they have a different quality of life, which then feeds into the wellness piece again.
I will take that job.
I think a lot of people.
If anyone is out there looking to employ, a podcast host and that's on their benefits package that you can work from anywhere in the world, I will accept.
I think it's interesting as well. Again, I work in nonprofits and with nonprofits and in arts and entertainment, but also I really champion sustainable careers in media and entertainment, and this is a big point for me. There is also something to be said for those who say that they want a certain thing because they are trying to recover.
Yes.
Which is not invalid. That's completely valid, but that's not sustainably motivational. So there's a difference as well, I think, from an individual perspective. And I have to ask myself, I want, extra time off so I can do the laundry, so I can catch up, so I can be on top of things. But the bigger picture is that I'm constantly in burnout. Or the bigger picture is I'm demotivated because I don't like my role. And if I did like my role, I probably wouldn't need to take those days off, or I probably wouldn't need to. And I think the construction of what wellness is, I think, as you're saying, that being able to reflect and as an individual and advocate, knowing whether you're running away from something or running towards something is really important.
And I think that's a hard thing for most of us to really have a grasp on, honestly. I think when someone is in a state of burnout, burnout has become a buzzword. I'm gonna say that it's a buzzword. And people talk about being burnt out for a day, but then bouncing back. And that's not actual burnout, right? And I think when people are in a true state of burnout, they can't see the future of when they're not going to feel that way.
Yeah.
Right. And so that's where the problem is that short term of what is it going to be that's going to make me feel better right now is the time off, probably. It is because when we're burnt out, we often withdraw from the humans that are closest to us, right? We stop doing the things that we don't find joy in most of the stuff. So it has some overlap with depression. Like people often talk about, maybe I'm depressed. I'm like, well, maybe. Also, maybe there's burnout. Like we have to look at it so much more holistically. And burnout is relatively new in terms of like the DSM, which we use for diagnostics. And
what's the D?
Oh my gosh. It's like a diagnostic something manual that I'm blanking on the S right now. But it basically gives you your parameters for how you diagnose for anxiety, for depression, etc. And burnout still is, they keep talking about adding it. They haven't fully added it. To be honest, I'm not up to date if they have added it. The last time I checked, they hadn't yet. And so when we're looking at things like someone experiencing true burnout, it's like, well, how do we actually deal with that? When I started, I was the only counselor in Vancouver that specialized in burnout.
Really?
Wow.
I couldn't find burnout on anyone else's website, on any specialty, through Psychology Today, through the BCACC. Like, burnout wasn't talked about. And it's so interesting. And I feel so much gratitude that I have a lot of humans now that work with me at the clinic that have now started specializing in burnout because they see it, right? So when we're looking at how do we help people in the short term, honestly, it's a little bit of looking at what are your necessary needs right now.
I love that.
And I want to kind of speak to two things that you mentioned. One was the individualization of having your needs met, I think is a big piece. The other thing is just a little anecdote. You talked about joy and finding regular joy in the day-to-day. I think sometimes things can get into quite the grind.
Yes.
And especially for people who work in project-based work, which is oftentimes the creative realms that we kind of play and work in. The thing is, it's like a boom-bust system, but sometimes you hit years, and sometimes even more if you're very fortunate, where it's just boom after boom after boom. It's great, but you never have that moment of that like bust. I mean, I know I'm using financial terms, which don't really play here. I just don't know what to call it otherwise, where you can kind of rest and recuperate in between. Or alternatively, sometimes you hit those and you can't actually rest because then you're worried about where your next paycheck comes from.
Yes.
Which is a whole nother, financial worry is actually a pillar of wellness as well. And we know that people cannot be present at work when they have base needs that are not met. So if there's financial worry, if there's housing worry, if there's food scarcity.
Safety.
Or in life.
Safety.
Yeah, base.
Go back to Maslow's hierarchy. So I think, one thing actually I had noticed for myself when I moved to the Netherlands, I moved there to do my master's, and it was during COVID. And so it was just like I had moved away from all of my family, my animals, my people, my now husband. And then I hit into like full on lockdown when I got there, which was crazy, and had a really intense course that I was going through.
And a podcast that you decided that you wanted to do.
That was actually a saving grace, to be honest. When we had our conversations, I felt so fueled because I wasn't seeing people.
Yeah.
So it did make me really happy. But what I realized is I started doing these little joy hunts. So I would go joy hunting, and I was like, hey, what do I need? I need a spark of something different. Like I can't just be in this regular routine day after day. And so I would like find something, and I generally tried to keep it on the set day so that I could make sure my studies were done and stuff. But sometimes it was like whenever I found a pocket and I would be like, okay, my joy today is going to like be checking out this museum or going to the zoo, or, when it was really locked down, it was just like traveling to a different city to explore that city because you couldn't necessarily go to zoos or museums, but it made an immediate difference. And I think that piece of giving people time off, I think oftentimes we do what is modeled to us and what we know.
Yeah.
And oftentimes that looks like, oh, you're tired, you should nap. You should sleep. But sometimes you're tired for a different reason. And maybe it is lack of sleep, but sometimes it's like you haven't had any spice in your life for months.
Very true.
Yeah. Sometimes you just need to do something and get yourself out of your routine. Or you need something that's going to inspire you. You need to go to a conference, or you need to meet someone new. Like for everyone, it might be different, or you need to create, you need to go do pottery, or sometimes you have to just get out. And so I think with this idea of creating a culture of wellness, those ideas of flex days or mental health days, I didn't really understand them at first, but now as we're talking, I think that is where I see there being like a really beautiful potential use. And maybe then what we need to do is start creating more conversations around what does a mental health day look like? What could it look like? Maybe not what does it look like? We don't be prescribing things to people, but give them those options. And I think that's where it really feeds into that piece of individuality.
Totally.
Right. And being able to create a system instead of someone telling you, well, you have acupuncture, or you have, you have to take a mental health day or whatever it is. Maybe giving the option to be flexible about what meets your needs. Or let's say you've just done like a crazy month. Maybe you just need to take a day and rest, and that's okay. And then it's like you said, it's maybe not true burnout, but it's like you need that to function with all cylinders.
To process, right? Like what you just experienced and what are your takeaways? What went well? What didn't? Sometimes people do that consciously. Sometimes they don't. Sometimes it's like more of a subconscious thing that you're doing. And I think there are organizations out there that are doing a good job of that. I would say more it's the managers that are doing a really good job of that. Like I have a couple folks that have talked to me and they've said, we just came off of this crazy project and I was working like 70 hours a week because we had this deadline that someone like 3 positions up made a deadline that was unrealistic for the team. We worked 70 hours a week and my manager was like, just work from home for the rest of the week and promise that you check your emails once a day. And honestly, don't come into the office. Like that was an unsustainable thing. Mm-hmm. And they're not logging vacation time. They're not logging sick days. They're not using their flex days or mental health days or anything. They just have a manager that's like, I value the work that you're doing. I understand that this was an unreasonable ask for us to make of you. And so let me give back. Would that manager probably get in trouble with their boss or with HR? I mean, yeah, probably. if they knew. But the flip side is their teams are producing, they're functioning, they're still being profitable, they're still getting the stuff done. They're just now taking the latitude to choose how to actually like support their teams differently than maybe what they traditionally have had access to do.
I love that. I love that so much. And I think we are in two worlds right now where we have, you know, some companies or even some people that have value systems that are very, very traditional, and it's being merged over through companies and again through even just individuals where, you know, they're trying to bring in this new culture of more rest and more wellness and hybrid work and all of these different pieces. And I think it can be really challenging. Like I've seen in certain companies where they keep this really rigorous, like 9 to 5. You know, people are talking about how Gen Z will just like clock out at 5. They're like, I don't care if you have a project due tomorrow and our client's not going to get it. I am clocking out at 5. That's a big issue from an organizational standpoint, right? Like you can't just be like, sorry, client, we didn't produce your stuff. But it's happening.
It is.
It's happening. And then the managers are oftentimes taking on that work as well as managing their people because the buck stops at them. So I guess where I think it's interesting is where can we meld this idea of more flexibility. So instead, I feel like the more rigid you are, the more you say your work hours are 9 to 5 and you have to be in here at 9, and you'll get a slip. If you don't get in here at 9, people are like, okay, then I'm going to clock out at 5 and I'm not going to stay for 5 minutes after 5.
That's how I would respond.
But if you have flexibility and you can be like, you know, these are the things that need to get done. We're going to have seasons where it's going to be a lot and we're going to have seasons where it's going to be less. And if you're feeling overwhelmed, I need to have open communication. I feel like this is almost like more of a feminine angle of management where you have it being more, I almost feel like it's webbed, like it's conversational and it's dynamic more than like rigid.
I would call it collaborative.
Collaborative, yes.
Right? Not even necessarily feministic. It's more of like a collaborative approach. I can't support you if you don't tell me that you are burnt out or that you're struggling or that you're overwhelmed. Like I can't do anything if I don't know, right? So the open communication is like really coming from a place of collaborative care.
Yes.
Right.
And it could be coming from places that you don't even expect. Like maybe they don't need time off. Maybe your processes aren't great.
Efficiency. Right? I mean, that is just like the downfall of so many organizations, I tell you.
So we don't have a ton more time, but I did want to ask one more question about, well, maybe Raquel might have another, but to that point of communication and creating an environment for collaborative, what did you say?
Collaborative care.
Collaborative care.
Yeah.
You Latitude Wellness and Counselling has a service for those who may not be able to afford or are not covered.
Yeah.
Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Yeah. So this is specifically more on the counseling side, and I'll talk to a little bit about what we have on the wellness. But for the counseling side, a huge part of our internship program that we implemented was to give back to the community. Giving back to the community is something that's really important to me. I think it's really important to make mental health accessible for folks with so much stigma still there. I think people are talking a lot more about mental health, but the reality is there is still a lot of stigma around it. I'm assuming we're roughly the same age, and like our parents' generation, like to this day, my dad like gives me a hard time about the fact that I listen to other people's problems, right? So trying to get rid of some of those barriers so people can access it. So our internship program was designed to be able to make it accessible. We have interns that offer 50-minute sessions for $80 or $25, depending on where they are in their practicum. And then we also offer sliding scale and pro bono work for folks that need it. With a revisit of like, how is this serving you? Because the other piece of it, and I'm going to add this quickly as an asterisk, is there has been a lot of research that if we give services for free, the value of them disappear. And so people take advantage of them, or they don't actually find the benefit of it because they're not paying for it. Yeah. And so part of that sliding scale and reduced rate is to ensure that people are accountable, but they have that conversation. Like, are you finding this helpful? Are you doing the homework? Are you getting something out of it? And that becomes part of the ongoing process, which is like every 6 to 8 sessions, roughly. Like, we don't need to harass people about the money portion. For the wellness side, we've had Serena, my business partner, who has offered to do some pro bono chiro services. And then one of our acupuncturists her name is Elise. She's incredible. And she really wanted to get back to the community. So for folks that are really, really struggling, or new moms is like an area that she loves, she'll do free acupuncture.
That's incredible.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, I have one final question on that. I don't have one final question. I could talk to you forever, but I'm just curious, going back to kind of that organizational piece and management, something clicked for me with what you were just saying about one of your practitioners really wanting to give back. I think that piece of creating a platform where there is that collaborative work with your employees, and where they feel safe enough and forward enough that they can say, hey, this is something I really want to do. Is there a place within the business for me to do that? How do you open up those conversations?
With my team specifically?
Mm-hmm.
So my corporate background comes in, and we do biannual check-ins with the team. And we are one of the only clinics that I'm aware of, and I am informed often by my team that we are the only ones that make them do this. And I say me, but like, they enjoy it, I think. They tell me they do. So, oh gosh, now I'm going to be thinking about that as I walk home. But we actually sit down and we go over what their goals are for the year. At the mid-year check-in, we ask about progress of the goals. And one of the questions, there's a number of them, but one of the questions is how can we support you in working towards the goals that you have, whether that's inside the clinic or outside? So some of our folks have said, I really want to do XYZ training. And we're like, great, how can we support you? It's like, can I have some time off? Is there like funding available that the clinic can help support with this? Or in situations where it's like, I really want to give back. So the holidays are coming when we're recording this, I guess, right now. And so this year, in the past, we've always supported different nonprofits and organizations. This year, we're actually going to be on Monday filming an offering for people to nominate families and folks that are struggling, and the clinic's going to support them for the holidays. And so whatever it is that they kind of need. And so that was actually brought to us by a practitioner. Instead of us supporting these folks, these families that they do need support, but are not necessarily connected to our community, how can we give back to them? Mm-hmm. And so during those biannual check-ins and like annual check-ins, folks are coming to us with these amazing ideas, and part of our job and like something that we feel very strongly about is being able to give back to community. And so it's part of our culture. Yeah. Right? Our company culture has made it so that it's accessible to do that.
Oh, I love that. I love that. Thank you so much for coming and recording with us.
Thanks for having me. I'm like surprised that the time went by so fast.
It's crazy, right?
Yeah. I'm like, oh.
It goes quick.
Okay, we're done.
So we know we've talked about Latitude Wellness. That's where everyone can find you. It's based here in BC. Do you have remote services as well as in person?
We do. So all of our counselling services are across British Columbia. We have a couple folks that can work across Canada for counselling specifically. Our naturopaths can do virtual care across British Columbia. So we're somewhat accessible, and we're going to expand. We're just one day at a time here.
So stay away from burning out on that front. Do not burn out.
I don't plan on doing it again. But
Lauren, thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me. Honestly, it's just such a joy.
Yay. Bye. Thanks for showing up, bombshells. We'd like to thank our brilliant media and production team for their incredible work on each episode. We look so shiny because of them. As for you, my darlings, head to our website, bombshellbrunches.com, to sign up to the mailing list for future events and deals, connect with us on socials, dig into resources, and leave us little love notes. Until next time, stay focused, fierce, and fabulous.
Bye. Bye.